Okay, so we're going to continue with our lesson on sight, and we're going to be looking at the function of the retina, and we're going to look at the retinal cells a little bit closer. Not these neurons, as I said before, okay, um, the bipolar cells and the ganglion cells here. We're going to concentrate on rods and cones. Before we do that, let's just make sure we understand that the light coming from, right, the cornea, through the lens, is being directed toward the back of the eye, okay? And you can see here that it has to pass through all of these axons, all right? So light, okay, will have to come in, pass through these axons, stimulate the rod and cone cells. So these cells will depolarize in their own fashion. These are the receptor cells of the eye. They will depolarize in their own fashion, okay, and create, and then pass that depolarization to the bipolar cells, which pass it to the ganglion cells, which converge to form the optic nerve, which, all right, send the information to the thalamus, which is a huge relay center in the brain for all kinds of senses. And the thalamus will relay, of course, those images to the primary visual cortex. The primary visual cortex will then unpack all of that and create the picture that you are seeing. You have to understand that, right? The picture the one that you are seeing is recreated from the environment. There's many parts of the environment that we don't perceive, okay, at all. We don't perceive them. We don't have the senses to perceive them. Okay, we don't see infrared light, for example. We don't see UV radiation. They're not part of our visual system, right? There's lots of sounds that we can't hear, for example. Okay, on and on. So, there's three types of cones that you can see here. They're different colors. Why? Because there's cones which respond to wavelengths in the red wavelength. There's cones that respond to blue wavelengths and cones that respond to green wavelengths. Okay, so rods are more numerous, okay, than cones are, and more sensitive. So for example, at night, our rods, very sensitive in low light, can detect light. Our cones have a very difficult time in low light. So in low light, our color perception is very, it's not very good, right? Because our rods are the ones doing the perceiving, okay? So there's lots of cones to provide the light eyes color sensitivity, okay? And of course, they're more concentrated in the macula, like I've said, okay? In the fovea, as I said before, is a rod-free area. That means it's 100% cones, as we said before, okay? And there's, again, three types of cones: red, green, and blue. They don't look that way. It's what they perceive, okay, or what they respond to. Okay, so red cones are sensitive to red light, green cones are sensitive to green light, blue cones are sensitive to blue light. Okay, and in the same way as this computer screen and your TV screen combines the three primary colors in additive combination, okay, for those of you who are artists, paints are subtractive, so in additive, light is additive. So what happens is that if we combine red, green, and blue, you're actually going to perceive white light. If you combine red and green, you get yellow. Green and blue, cyan, blue and red, magenta. But then different combinations, okay, of different source of light, okay, allows us to perceive millions of colors. Now this sentence is almost a whole course in biology, okay, at least a whole unit in sight. Please watch this video. It does a better job than I can in explaining how these three types of cones combine to give us the millions of color combinations that we can see as human beings. I'm going to ask you to skip this chemistry of sight in rods. Okay, this is something that we're not going to cover in this course, so don't worry about that. And that brings us to the end of this short lesson on rods and cones. Before I stop, we have to actually just make sure one little thing before I leave you. Here we are. Notice the shape. Okay. Now in this diagram isn't very good. The cones are actually quite smaller than the rods. So rods are actually quite larger, all right, than cones are. Cones have this conical shape, while rods have this rod shape to them. All right, that's the last thing I needed to tell you. Cheers.